two lovely girls. Josie's 22 and Allison is 20. This is when Josie just graduated college in May. So, not going to the next slide. Sorry, I don't know why it's not going to the next. Here we go. So, partly I just wanted to let people know what do some of the alphabet soup of some of the credentials that people work with, what does it mean? So an LSW or an LPC is a counselor who has gotten a master's degree, but is pretty new with working in the field. After 2 years of supervised clinical experience and passing a state licensing exam, people can be an LCSW, which is what I am, or if they have a degree in psychology instead of social work, they'll be an LCPC. There are also doctorate degrees in psychology, PsyD or PhD, and then the professionals who are able to prescribe psychotropic medications for mental health issues, that would be a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist. So a psychiatrist is actually a medical doctor who specializes in behavioral health issues. So that's who we are. Okay. So some of what we're going to talk about today is neurodiversity. So neuro has to do with the brain, right? Diversity is everybody's brain is different, of course. And it's not by choice. Nobody has a choice. You know, nobody would choose to have a brain that makes it harder for them to sit down than other people. Nobody chooses to have a brain that makes them much more prone towards anxiety, depression. So these are some of the different issues that can come up because of neurodiversity. Autism, being on the spectrum, dyslexia, trauma, how we handle things that we're confronted with, developmental disabilities, cultural diversity, oppositional defiant disorder, language difficulties, ADHD, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, auditory processing, how we're able to understand things that we're hearing, sensory integration. Some people just are super sensitive to loud noises, to to different tags on their clothes. The feeling of socks. People don't choose this. It's how our brain kind of integrates some of this. If people are gifted, developmental or coordination disorders, attention deficit disorder, Tourette's. So those are some of the things that can come up out of the diversity of how our brains work. So specifically about autism, since that's some of the population that our agency works with, it affects 1 in 68 children, and that number is actually from 2014. That number is just going up. And there's a lot of different factors for that, environmental factors, but it is becoming much more prevalent over time. It's the fastest growing developmental disability in the United States. There's a huge cost to families because of therapies that are needed to help the kids be successful in school, be able to, be able to work, be able to be, as healthy as possible, contributing members of society. So, another statistic, boys are much more likely to be dealing with autism than girls. And there's no medical detection or cure for autism, but we do have a lot of therapies that help us be able to understand where the person's brain is at and be able to help them thrive the best they can with that. So 10 things every child with autism wants you to know, and these are things that are applicable for any kind of kid who's going through a lot of troubles that also, they're not choosing to be bad. They're not choosing to have a tough time. There's something that just, something that makes it tough for them. And so we kind of have to get at the root of what's going on, not just look at the iceberg, but what's underneath. So I'm first and foremost a child. Autism is just one aspect of my character. Ordinary sights, sounds, and touches or everyday life that are normal for you can be painful for me. We say that people dealing with some of these sensory issues kind of feel things like times 10. If things are loud for you, things for somebody who's dealing with sensory issues might be 10 times as tough to understand. So it isn't that I don't listen to you, it's just that I can't understand you. Sometimes there's trouble processing what people are understanding. I like routines because I know what to expect. That's one of the biggest things that can be super helpful for people who feel like they're dealing with a lot, people who are overwhelmed. Structure, routine can be so helpful in taking away some of the anxiety about, I'm not sure what's going on now. Don't compare me with other children. I'm special in my own way. It's hard for me to tell you what I need when I don't know the words to say it. A lot of times, especially with young kids, their language just isn't as nuanced to be able to explain what's going on with them. A lot of times, that's why sometimes speech therapy goes along really well with mental health, with ABA therapy, to be able to help kids express themselves. It really helps cut down their frustration. So focus and build on what I can do rather than what I can't do. We always want to be strengths-based. I want to be with others, but I don't know how. Sometimes some of the social cues that might be natural for a lot of us are just not picked up on by some folks. But they absolutely, they absolutely can learn if you're kind of giving them a more deliberate, some more deliberate training and practice and some of that. And then love me unconditionally, because I promise I'm worth it. Of course. I wanted to say too, if anybody has any questions or wants to make any comments as I'm going through this, please feel free. I would love it to be a back and forth discussion, not like a mini lecture. So, yes, thank you.
Can certain children who've been exposed to trauma over a long period of time exhibit the same behaviors? And can trauma be perhaps prolonged yelling, spanking, being ignored, not feeling seen, heard, or understood, being ignored by authority figures such as police, teachers, parents, affect children in this way?
Absolutely. So this slide here has some actual brain scans, and you can see how the brain scans are different for people who are dealing with different issues and people who are not. So speaking about trauma, there's the PTS brain, post-traumatic stress disorder, and so you can see how some of the brain is actually changed by prolonged stress, by prolonged trauma. And there's different brain scans there for ADHD, bipolar, depression. So a lot of different mental health issues and trauma. It does affect the brain. That's why, like I said, the person is not choosing to have a heightened reaction to some of the experiences that they've been through. Yes, thank you.
Yes. My name is Curtis Young. Back in our time, at least, study that came out due to the fact of concussions. In our days, when you got to receive a concussion playing sports, a hit upside the head, the damage that was done to the brain then weren't really notified. They would tell you to go in, go to bed, lay down and take a nap, which now study came out as the worst thing that you could do. Now, just recently, about 3 months ago, they came up with a new study of the brain. It's called, I think, you've heard of CT. It's something called CT now that they are looking into, that these athletes get a hit upside the head. They're trying to stop this physical sports as soccer, football, and boxing. A tremendous amount of damage is done to the brain. That later on down the line that has all these elements to the brain that controls the body. I also would like to know there's so many brain cells that the brain has that it's a tremendous number that's unbelievable. I don't know if it's 1 billion, 86 billion or something like this, brain cells in the brain that we are having, anything of that nature. You heard of it. It's just something came out about 3 or 4 months on the news, and they want to stop this physical sports being happening right now, athletics and talking what they're going through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. So, absolutely. Physical trauma to the head through a concussion, through sports. Absolutely, all of that can have an effect. I think we've heard over time how for football players, NFL football players, they have, they're doing ongoing studies about the ongoing effect. High school kids that play sports now, my daughters were dancers. They weren't even in a contact sport, but they did a baseline cognitive testing on all of the kids so that if there was some kind of a event through the season, through the year, they had a baseline to test the kid to see if there seems to be injury to the brain. And if there is, they wouldn't be able to play for a while until a doctor okayed it. So they're absolutely being more aware and cognizant now of how some trauma to the brain affects, affects behavior, affects things going forward.
How can one who has not been diagnosed in childhood, who is now older, but highly functioning, how can one go about seeing those signs of autism in one building?
Okay, so some of these symptoms of autism, these can be for children and they can be for adults. If an adult is dealing with autism, they might not have gone through the therapies to help work on these things. They might be more pronounced. And of course, through their life, they're going to do what they can to be more adapted into their school, their work environment. But even as an adult, they can definitely, these are some of the signs, specifically of autism. Lack of eye contact, it's just not comfortable for the person. Again, like some of the sensory issues. Unusual, monotonous games, doing things repetitively, rejecting social touch. It's just a sensory thing. It's not that they, and one of the signs of autism is not having the same kind of back and forth relationships.
Yes, good morning. My name is James Adams.
Hi, James.
My question is that how, looking at the disorders you just posted, my question is if a child has been exposed to illegal substance, drugs, marijuana, does that have also an effect on the manipulation of the brain, how the way they react? The reason I ask because about 20-some years ago, I lost a nephew who was taking narcotics, and it made him of a violent individual at times.
Yeah.
And so due to gun violence, he lost his life. And so my question is, if we could have noticed that as he was growing up, any changes in his behavior from the introduction to drugs, marijuana, smoking cigarettes, alcohol, does that have a basis for these disorders later in life?
So absolutely, and I believe, yeah, since you specialize with substance abuse disorders, I know you'd be able to.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Flora Winfield, and everybody calls me Flo. You heard pastors say Mama Flo. I have a lot of spiritual children. I am a registered nurse. I am a certified substance abuse counselor. I am also a long-term person in recovery. And so your question, you're asking if you could have picked up on some things going on with your nephew as they were happening. Could it have prevented what happened to him? Is that your question?
Yes, because I had a mom who also was in mental health. But my question is, we didn't notice any of these issues with him. Because I guess he didn't show it to the adult side of the family, but he was showing it to his friends and things like that. But then it became too late. Because then now, he would act aggression at times.
Right.
We never knew when he was happy because all it had something like a wrong with him. There's something with him that I picked up growing up, but I never knew that after seeing all of this morning, what could have been. So this is just information gathered so I can share with somebody else.
Right.
Who I may know at where I work at, have children that's acting out right now, and maybe these sons that they're going through, what I went through, make sure with them, what they need to do, and you contact with the doctor here about what they can do to prevent this type of occurring within the youth growing up in young age, because adolescent youth.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say help is available. You know, as she was saying, help is available for our children that's experiencing addiction or experimenting with drugs, or not even, also children as well as adults. If you're around someone and the behavior starts to change, you see a difference in that person's behavior, it's really important to address that change, to pay attention to what you're seeing. Because a lot of times we dismiss. We don't want to know that Johnny's using drugs. We don't want to know that, people the behavior is changing. So we'll, like they say, turn the other cheek. We'll turn our head and not really pay attention to it. Because we don't want to maybe not know how to deal with it, how to address it. Don't want to upset that person. So it's a lot of things that come into play with that, but we have to pay attention to our children because someone is continuously using drugs, continuously getting involved in negative things and negative behavior. It's going to show. And so our part as the person that loves them, cares about them, want the best for them, our part is to pay attention to what's going on. What are the changes you're noticing? And to not just ignore those changes, but to at some point address those changes with that person. You can talk to other family members to check and say, well, you see Johnny's changing friends. He used to hang with this crowd, now he's with the other crowd.
Yeah.
So if you see something different going on with your child, we owe it to them to address it, and not just turn